When you buy a bottle of water, do you actually know what it costs? Not the price on the label, but the real cost. Here are the numbers that tell the full story. In Mecosta County, Michigan, Nestlé paid roughly $200 a year in permit fees to pump millions of gallons of groundwater and drained local wells completely dry. They bottled it in plastic that takes centuries to break down, then sold it back to the same communities whose water they had quietly taken. The profit margin on extracted water compared to what they paid to pull it from the ground is almost impossible to overstate. I'm John. This is an investigation into the privatization of water, how corporations turned a basic human need into one of the most profitable industries on the planet. We're not talking about oil, gold, or data. We're talking about the one resource you cannot survive without for more than a few days. For most of human history, water was a shared resource, something communities held in common, not something anyone owned. That started changing in the late 1970s when the corporate world realized something powerful. They could monetize basic thirst. The strategy was simple but ruthless. Make people distrust the water coming out of their taps, then sell them a bottled alternative at a massive premium. By 2024, the global bottled water market had reached $347 billion, with Nestlé, the titan behind Poland Spring, Arrowhead, and Pure Life, near the center of that empire. But the extraction model behind those clean-looking labels is where things get genuinely disturbing. In Pennsylvania, some companies pay as little as $10 to $200 per year for water extraction permits, then pull millions of gallons from local groundwater while generating hundreds of millions in annual revenue. Industry defenders point to jobs, a few thousand employees across U.S. operations, but a handful of positions doesn't come close to offsetting the long-term damage to aquifers, local water tables, and the communities that depend on them. Nowhere is that imbalance sharper than in California, where homeowners were fined for watering their lawns during record droughts, while industrial bottling operations kept pumping from the same depleted groundwater systems without pause. Their legal cover? Historical water rights dating back to the 1800s, a loophole designed for an era when industrial-scale extraction wasn't even physically possible. That same legal structure allowed corporations to drain ecosystems dry, disrupt wildlife habitats, and operate 24 hours a day under restriction orders that only applied to residents. While PR teams donated water bottles at community events, lobbyists worked behind the scenes to block tighter extraction rules and delay any meaningful reform. The gap between public image and private action isn't accidental, it's engineered. Short-term economic benefits have never offset the long-term ecological damage. And what we're witnessing, slowly, deliberately, is the privatization of a resource that once belonged to everyone. Now let's talk about the psychological side, because the extraction model only works if you keep buying the product. To sell you water, corporations had to make you afraid of the free version, the water already flowing into your home. Marketing campaigns used images of glaciers, alpine springs, and pristine mountain sources to construct a feeling that bottled water is pure, safe, and trustworthy in the way tap water simply isn't. But here's what the science actually says. In cities like New York, Vienna, and Copenhagen, tap water is tested hundreds of times a day and held to some of the strictest safety standards of any consumable product in the world. Bottled water, by contrast, is regulated as a packaged food product, meaning it's often tested less frequently than the water coming out of your kitchen sink. And the health risks go further than most people realize. A 2024 study found that a single liter of bottled water can contain hundreds of thousands of nanoparticles, fragments so small they can cross biological barriers and enter the human bloodstream directly. We aren't buying purity. In many cases, we're buying plastic contamination with a mountain logo on the label. When public water systems fail, as they did catastrophically in Flint, Michigan, the bottled water industry shows up with donation pallets and camera crews securing massive goodwill from the public. Meanwhile, their lobbyists are quietly opposing the legislation that would have prevented those systems from failing in the first place. It's a closed loop. Undermine the public alternative, profit from the collapse, then block the repair. Now let's go back to Michigan, because the human cost here is impossible to ignore. In a major 2025 legal settlement, a bottling company was fined $4 million after years of aggressive pumping drained the residential wells that local families relied on for drinking water, cooking, and basic sanitation. Families woke up with no water. Trucks carrying that exact groundwater drove past their homes on the way to supermarkets across the state. And that is the cruelest part of this story. The corporation's defense was consistent and technically accurate. They were operating within the law. That is the most frightening sentence in this entire investigation. These water extraction laws were written in the 19th century, long before industrial pumping equipment existed, and long before a single company could drain a county's water supply in months. We are applying 100-year-old rules to 21st century corporate infrastructure, and the results are exactly what you would expect. $4 million in fines sounds like real accountability, but for a company generating that in revenue within hours of a normal business day, it barely registers as a line item. When the penalty costs less than the profit, it stops being a deterrent and starts being a business expense. The communities left behind face dry wells, collapsing property values, and a government they no longer trust to protect them. And Michigan isn't an exception. Nearly identical fights are playing out in Florida, Colorado, and every region where significant aquifers exist. Wherever there is water underground, there is a corporation racing to lock up the extraction rights before anyone else does. And the damage goes beyond ecology, it's geological and it's permanent. Over-extraction causes ground subsidence, sinkholes, and aquifer collapse. And once an aquifer collapses from overpumping, it can never hold water again. We are permanently dismantling the planet's underground water storage systems so someone can pick up a convenient bottle at a gas station. And now the financial world has entered the picture, in the most consequential way possible. Since 2020, water has been actively traded as a financial futures contract on major exchanges, the same way investors bet on crude oil, wheat, and gold. For the first time in human history, sophisticated investors can profit directly when droughts devastate agricultural regions and communities run out of options. The World Bank projects that by 2030, 2.4 billion people will live in severely water-stressed regions. Corporations aren't just bottling water anymore. They are accumulating extraction rights, positioning themselves as the owners of the resource that will define geopolitics for the next 50 years. If that trajectory continues unchecked, access to clean water could shift from a democratic public right to a subscription service priced according to market demand. That's not science fiction. It is the logical endpoint of treating survival as a tradable commodity on an open exchange. We have watched this pattern before, in healthcare, in housing. When profit takes priority over people, communities bear the cost, and individuals absorb the loss. The difference with water is that there is no substitute. You can find workarounds for medication costs and rental prices. You cannot find an alternative to water. But here's what this investigation also found. The resistance is real and it is growing. Grassroots organizations are winning extraction permit challenges in court, and some cities have already rebuilt public water infrastructure to the point where bottled water sales have dropped significantly. That's proof that when the public option works, when people trust it, they do not need the corporate version. The real solution is not a reusable water bottle. That just transfers the burden back to you as an individual and lets the system off the hook. The actual solution is structural. Protect public water access as a legal right and rewrite the extraction laws that have handed corporations century-old loopholes to exploit in a modern economy. Calling a disposable plastic bottle sustainable is greenwashing at its most cynical, full stop. The next time you reach for a bottle at the checkout counter, ask yourself one question. Are you paying for water, or are you paying for the privilege of slowly losing it? This is not hopeless, but it requires action. Demand updated extraction laws, support public water investment, and understand what you are participating in every time you make that purchase. If this investigation changed how you see that bottle, subscribe to Hidden Costs, and we'll see you in the next one.